You know what's worse than having your liver extracted through your nasal cavity? Stubbing your pinky toe on doors, coffee tables, and ill-placed household items not too dissimilar from the spawn of hell in the inflictions they so cruelly bestow upon mortal men. If you're anything like me, you've doubtless walked around your home while wrought with dread over the thought of accidentally ramming your foot into a door frame. Well, thanks to today's sponsor, you'll never have to live in such fear again. Bill's Anti-Toe Stubbing Emporium offers a variety of quality products which will protect your dainty little toes from the vile inanimate objects out to swell them. From foam padding custom shaped to fit door frames and chair legs to a 100 decibel alarm which will trigger when sophisticated radars mounted to every surface in your house detect an impending collision. There's nothing you can't find within the walls of Bill's humble emporium. My favorite product is My favorite product is the indentured shell, a titanium thimble which you can have welded to your toe. The way I see it, the indentured shell leaves you with one less thing to worry about for the rest of your life aside from gangrene. Bill's Anti-Toe Stubbing Emporium, lawsuit free for 27 days. Good morning after eve night, Cosmoronic number 3, I'm Fringin, I hope you're all doing well. I suppose to address, you know, the most biting question, what happened last week? Where were you? You promised that you'd do these every week. Now, I never promised that, but I guess it was a reasonable expectation, what with me calling it a weekly show. I guess, you know, if we're gonna get into the semantics, it wasn't really a promise. It was more like, it was more like a marketing shtick, if anything. I do find it really funny, though, that I was only able to do, like, 2 episodes. I was only able to maintain a 2-week streak. It's not even really a streak at that point. It's more like a coincidence. But, you know, in my defense, it's been busy. I've been working a lot of things, you know. Lots of stuff is, in the pipeline right now. Things didn't line up quite well last Tuesday, so yeah, no episode. Sorry. Yeah, I have been thinking about that a bit, like, There are a few projects. It feels like it might be worthwhile to focus in on one thing at a time rather than having my attention pulled in multiple directions. But I don't know, I like the novelty. I like the change of pace. I don't like that it feels like when working on multiple projects, you're developing multiple skills, right? Writing, editing, illustration, I guess voiceover in this case. I guess it's just, you always... One of the things that... I've gathered over, like, the last couple of years of pretty obsessively reading books on, like, philosophy and self-help and stuff like that is that there is no... Everybody's got different answers on how you ought to approach any given thing. And when it comes to working on stuff, like trying to cultivate skills or work on a project, you know, some people say that it's important to, like, focus specifically on one thing, to really invest your time into one activity. And then other people will say that it's worthwhile to do a couple other things too, you know, to get a little bit of variety in there. I don't know. I have no idea what approach I should do. Should I focus on one project at a time or work on multiple projects at a time? Does it make sense to work on a big chungus video while also working on a comic where you need to release a new page every week, and then also doing not only this podcast, but another podcast too? Among other things. I don't know. Is that indicative of a flawed approach, or is this counterintuitively balanced in some way? I have no idea. But, you know, you ultimately do the work that you're interested in, right? I feel pretty compelled to work on multiple creative projects. I don't know that I personally can do one thing always. I think I get bored pretty quickly. Then again, that might just be because the hard part of working on any big project, and this is especially true of the big video I'm working on right now. I've been working on that one for a long time, and there have been points while I've been working on it that I have wanted to quit and just move on to do something else. I'm glad I chose not to, because now progress is being made again, and I'm confident that it's going to be finished, and hopefully it's going to be good. But, you know, you have those moments where you're like, oh, what am I doing here? Should I do something else? This is stupid. It's a waste of time. This is going to suck. I should just move on, cut my losses and do something else. But, I don't know. It's having the persistence to make it to the end, I think, is really important, because if you finish something, you can fix it, or alternatively, you can make the decision to not do it and just move on to something else, but you kind of don't know whether or not that's something you should do until you finish it, because before you finish it, it's not really anything yet, is it? I don't know, the creative process is a cruel mistress sometimes, but you just gotta take it one step at a time. I've been watching the Book of Boba Fett, and I don't like it. When I first started watching, by the end of episode 1, I think I felt that it was stronger than The Mandalorian, another show I don't like. And I think the reason why I thought that it was stronger was because I could kind of see an attempt to tell a serialized story about Boba Fett, even if I wasn't thrilled with the story that they were trying to tell. Unfortunately, I think that show falls off a cliff, and not only does it fall off a cliff and just have significant problems in terms of its writing that really have plagued all of the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus, and broadly all of the branded, like including the Marvel stuff as well. Just nonsensical action scenes that I honestly wouldn't be surprised if there was a quota on how many action scenes every episode must feature. The general trend seems to be 2 action scenes. One round about somewhere between the beginning of the episode, right at the start, or somewhere around Act 1, and then a huge action scene at the end of Act 3. You might get 1 or 2 extra for good measure, but you will never get 1 less than that. You will never get less than 2. Just go back, watch all of the episodes of The Mandalorian, and just check. No less than 2 every time. Now, that's not a particularly great way to write stories when you have to find a way to put action scenes in constantly, but it would be nice if they were actually good. You know, I feel like that would be a big help. Unfortunately, they're not, and the Book of Boba Fett is no exceptions. Right out of the gate with, like, a nonsense action scenes where Boba Fett gets ambushed, and then these dudes with like laser axes and weird taser things that they start poking him with. It was awful, but I guess it was a good tone setter in that it told us exactly what to expect from this show. But I mean, you know, nonsense action scenes don't destroy a story, right? You can have nonsense action scenes and still tell a good story. Unfortunately, the Star Wars Disney Plus shows seem to be mired with just bizarre character writing and dialogue. I'm not sure how to describe it, but the Disney Plus Star Wars shows often, there is so little in terms of the conversations that people have. It feels like we barely cross like the minimum threshold of information that these characters ought to be conveying to one another based on what they want and what their, you know, what their objectives are, what their values are. You know, it feels like we're missing lines of dialogue constantly. There is such minimal content in a lot of these shows where I just want more conversations. I want more information on what the characters believe. And not, you know, not conveyed through, like, flat-out exposition. I don't need that. But it's not that simple. It's not exposition or nothing at all. I just wish they spoke more about the things that they believed in. You know, it just feels like the conversations, like, half the lines are cut. You know, when they're making amendments to the script, but then there's no attempt to, like, tie everything together. And, you know, terrible plotting. Just utterly terrible plotting. So, you know, just all the hallmarks of bad storytelling. Unfortunately, because, you know, when I first started watching The Mandalorian, I liked it. I was hoping that, I felt a little bit more optimistic after episode 1 of The Mandalorian. It didn't take long, unfortunately. It was around about episode 3 that it was just like, oh, uh-oh. And then episode 4, it's like, yeah, we're done. We're screwed. And it never really improved from there. But I mean, I was on that show's side. In terms of its premise, it's really cool. I love my space bounty hunters. I really do. And I would love to watch a space bounty hunter show. It'd be great. But I still haven't gotten it. The show that I want to see, I still don't have. Of the bounty hunter going on his quests and his adventures, meeting all sorts of different people, doing all sorts of different missions, and being challenged on his morals. Or not even necessarily challenged, we just get to see how he values things and the decisions he makes. How pragmatic is he? What are the lines that he won't cross? And we can spend a little time doing that before we kick off the Baby Yoda plotline, but we do it straight away. He's basically a good guy the whole time through. Because it feels like, and it feels especially clear in the Book of Boba Fett, we are not interested in doing stories about anti-heroes or villains. We are not interested in following the POV of somebody who is a little bit unscrupulous, a little bit cold, or particularly cunning. When we don't want to do that. Everybody needs to be a good guy. We gotta get everybody to basically be a super duper good guy. Feels particularly awkward when the Book of Boba Fett is supposed to be a crime show about a crime lord, but yet it is very clear good guys and bad guys. I don't even really understand in what way Boba Fett is a crime lord in the show. He's just he's just this weird amalgamation of... He's just a boss, you know, like he is just a vague boss of things in an area. Odd choice, but you can make it work. It does feel pretty funny though, that we have this whole Tusken subplot to basically just advance him to the position of, no, we want Boba Fett to be this guy. You know, he's not in it a lot, but I think we have a pretty solid idea of who Boba Fett is, and we can infer a lot about who Boba Fett would be based on what we saw of him in the OT. But then we get him out of the Sarlacc pit, and then we just hardcore expedite that character development. He got picked up by the Tuskens, and by picked up, you know, enslaved. that convenient little detail that often gets forgotten by the show. Gets enslaved, he becomes friends with the Tuskens and helps them and learns their culture, gets his little stick, and then the Tuskens get wiped out. He takes his revenge. The Tuskens changed him. I want to be good now. In 4 episodes that are also meant to be trying to tell a story about what's happening in the modern day with a war about to break out between the syndicate run by the Pikes. Yeah, we get a very, very minimal time dedicated to the present day story because we gotta spend so much time doing the flashbacks to expedite that character development. It's a very odd choice, and I really don't like it. But then we have 4 episodes like that, and then we just get to episode 5, which is utterly baffling. Episode 5 is very bizarre. Episode 5, and then episode 6, which we'll talk about a little bit more shortly, they are just not episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. They do not feel like that. The big giveaway would be that episode 5 is all about the Mandalorian. It is 100% about the Mandalorian. There's nothing to do with the Book of Boba Fett. And it's not just that the Mandalorian is going on an adventure that is adjacent to that story. It's not even remotely related. It is entirely about advancing the Mandalorian. It honestly feels like the premiere of Season 3. That something happened in terms of production, whether it meant that they couldn't film all of Mando, or they couldn't do all of the Boba Fett episodes that they wanted with the time that they had, and they just pulled the premiere of The Mandalorian, chucked it into the Book of Boba Fett, and that was that. I think it's the best episode of, I think it is the best episode of the Book of Boba Fett, which is pretty funny, all things considered. But it doesn't fit at all. And, you know, I'm not happy with the direction that the show has gone, but I guess I would like to see a little bit more Boba Fett. And then we get episode 6. Now, apparently, episode 6 is held in very high regard by a decent amount of people. I can see why, but not for particularly great reasons. Episode 6 of The Mandalorian is best described as like a broad, nebulous Star Wars variety show. We're getting all the cameos. We got Luke, we got Ahsoka, R2-D2, Cad Bane. We're just getting everybody in there. So many different crazy characters. And everybody seems to be thrilled, and I just don't care. Because, unfortunately, it's just fan service. It's very shallow fan service. And it feels particularly interesting and perhaps a little bit concerning in terms of the broad trends of the entertainment industry and storytelling right now, that one of the best received, in fact, I think both of them are pretty well received by comparison, the two of the best received episodes of the Book of Boba Fett, starring Boba Fett, have nothing to do with him. Episode 6, he's in it for about a minute, and he says nothing. And it's everybody's favorite episode of the Book of Boba Fett. Because Luke Skywalker and R2-D2 and Ahsoka and Cad Bane. Just cameos. Hey, remember those characters? They're here now. Isn't that cool? Does it make sense why they're here? I don't know. What do they want? I have no idea. What's the story we're telling? But they're here. Isn't that nice? I want to talk about fan service. Now, I've talked about it before. I made a video on it. You should check it out. I think it's pretty neat. But we'll talk about it again for those of you who haven't seen it. I'm not going to hold it against you. Fan service is it's a whole topic, and it's a little bit hard to discuss because I don't know that we all agree on what fan service is. What is fan service? Is it references? Is it in-jokes? Is it cameos? Is it giving people what you know that they want to see? That's a little vague, isn't it? Like, is it merely fan service that, say, a beloved character who, you know, isn't typically in this story shows up? You know, what if it makes a lot of sense, right? What if it is not that, like, it makes perfect sense for the story that you're telling that you would want that character to be there. It's like, is that fan service? Like, well, I guess people would really like to see that. But I mean, if it's a legitimate storytelling choice, how much does the intent of the writer come into play when we talk about fan service? Because, you know, death of the author. Again, it's pretty easy to infer in this case that there was an intent to get these characters in here because they knew that people would be thrilled about it. But that's, you know, that's not, surely that's not good enough, right? Like, we need more to be able to identify that this is fan service. And I guess, more importantly, is this bad fan service? Because is all fan service the same? Is there a meaningful difference to be drawn between the likes of Spider-Man No Way Home or Arcane versus Boba Fett? And, you know, by extension, like, all the Disney Plus Star Wars shows? You know, you think about in Arcane, it's an adaptation of a video game, a pretty popular video game that has some really cool characters in it, who have super duper crazy moves and iconic looks and things like that. And Arcane does feature instances where we see those iconic moves, you know, represented in the show. But it's not... Yeah, there's a difference, you know? There is a difference between them. Feels like in Arcane, we take our time. We're not trying to blow our load straight away in terms of references. How much attention do they call to themselves? Because some of them are pretty overt, and some of them are incredibly subtle, like little background elements that you may not even notice, or just little nods. And, you know, is there an element, an interesting element, which has been discussed a lot, of your knowledge of the games informing what you're paying attention to, and the little hints and things that you get, in terms of where characters are going, and whether their look is going to change to be more like that of the video games. Feels like they're working a lot harder to earn those references, and that those references don't outstay their welcome. But I think, you know, the most important aspect of what makes it work well versus not is, does it make sense as part of the story that you're telling? This feels particularly apt, right? When we think about Cad Bane showing up in episode 6, how do we first establish that he's here and he's coming? We have a big, wide shot of the desert with his little silhouette approaching with I was about to call them heat waves. I don't know what they're called. The little shimmer that you get in the air when, you know, when it's reflecting off a hot surface. Now, it's a really cool shot, but did Cad Bane just walk all the way through the deserts of Tatooine to get there? Like, how he gets there, pretty stupid when you think about it in terms of what's happening in universe, you know? Cad Bane is not some famous little, like, he's not a character from a cartoon show that everybody really likes in the Star Wars universe. He is a person in that universe who needs to go places and get around. How did he get there? And when he walks off, is he just gonna walk through the whole desert? Where's his car or bantha? You know, how did he get there? I think it's pretty clear in this case that they wanted the shot, and we do not care about whether it makes sense in the story. Feel like that's a pretty clear example of not working very hard to earn your fan service. And you know, touched on it briefly, but what is the intent behind fan service? Is it earnest storytelling? Or is the objective to get those reaction videos to stoke speculation, keep people coming back week after week? Is your intent primarily on telling a compelling story, or do you have other objectives that are starting to seep in and taint that more pure objective when it comes to writing of telling the best story you can? But you know, whose fault is it that we are getting more episode 6s? Whose fault is it that it is now becoming much more of a trend broadly across the industry that throw in characters that everybody remembers and loves from other stories, throw them in, get them claps, get that attention that you want on social media, or already talking about it? You know, whose fault is that? Because you don't get the talking on social media without people doing talking. Yeah, you learn a new thing every day here on Cosmoronic. People don't talk if they don't talk. What I'm trying to imply here is that, is it our fault that this is becoming more of a trend? That we're getting stuff that is just throwing all of these characters at you, like, look, you remember them, you like that, this is Star Wars, it's cool, you love Star Wars, right? Keep your subscription to Disney Plus. Look, who might show up next week? You look to the future, and you see a lot of cause for concern on this front. Everything that I've heard about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is leading me to believe that that film is going to just be a cameo fest. So many characters. We got Patrick Stewart as Professor X. We might get Wolverine, or maybe Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is going to show up. Holy crap! Woohoo, all these characters. Who knows who's going to come in? Stay tuned to find out. Make sure that you pre-order your tickets. Kenobi's coming up next. How many cameos are we going to get in that one? Who's going to show up from the Clone Wars show? Or who are they going to adapt from the decanonized EU and put in here to get all of those clicks and attention? Like, should we just expect this standard of storytelling going forward from, like, big IP franchises? Episode 6 was just poorly written. You know, I feel like that's the point that needs to be hammered in right now. Episode 6 of the Book of Boba Fett was just really poorly written. We had people acting out of character, people existing in certain locations for no rhyme or reason, very bizarre decisions being made. Like, you know, in episode 6 of the Book of Boba Fett, there's a point where Luke, after he's done some training with Grogu, and after the Mandalorian leaves the planet, he presents Grogu with, here's some chainmail armor made out of Beskar. Mando made it. This is a lightsaber. It's Yoda's it's Yoda's lightsaber. I don't know how he got it, considering that it got zapped out of Yoda's hands in Coruscant when he was fighting the Emperor, but it's Yoda's lightsaber. Now, very small infants choose between this incredibly dangerous weapon so that you can become a Jedi, or alternatively, choose the chainmail, and then you don't get to be a Jedi, and you go back to the Mandalorian. Decide. What? It's a baby! What kind of, like... Why would Luke be presenting this decision to this baby? And also, why would Luke Skywalker, of any Jedi, have the perspective that attachment and investment in other people means that you can no longer be a Jedi? One of the most important things about Luke is that he cared about people, he cared about his friends, he cared about the cause, and all of these things informed his decisions. It was the detachment and all that was like the problem broadly with the Jedi in the prequels. It was a big difference between him and them. But now it's gone. He's back to just being like kind of a floopy Jedi instead of being a little bit more interesting a Jedi. And like, you know, you can still have friends and stuff like that. You know, it's about balance. It's about figuring out how to balance your duties to your friends versus your duties to, I guess, broad goals or your duty to the Force in a certain sense. Do you understand what I mean? Like, the writing is compromised. I don't know if it's necessarily compromised by the fan service. It might have been, right? We need Yoda's lightsaber. It couldn't just be a normal lightsaber. It needs to be Yoda's lightsaber. We just got kind of like, he's not acting in character, but you get this general sense of like, oh, he's more like the Luke that I know, unlike in, say, TLJ. He's a little bit more in character. He's running around doing Jedi stuff, talking about how the Force is neat and all that. But that's not good enough, right? Like, that's not enough to say that we're doing a great job here. But I don't know, it seems like a lot of people don't seem to care. And I will say, this is a bit of a tangent, but for those of you who don't know, Luke is basically entirely the creation of computers and CGI, and I think the big thing that was surprising is that apparently even his voice, like Mark Hamill didn't do the voice, they created the voice using a computer, like that they gathered a bunch of samples and then made like a speech synthesizer that just emulates him. So we have Luke Skywalker here, it ain't Mark Hamill. You plop Luke Skywalker's face on some other dude, and then have the voice done by a computer. Now, a lot of people seem to be really cool with that, and man, it feels like we are entering into some hyper cyberpunk right now. You don't need the actor. Not only do you not need the actor physically, but you don't even need the actor's voice. I guess before I proceed, not to undermine the visual effects work, because they did a very good job. Like, this time around, it looks way better than he did at the end of The Mandalorian. And from that perspective, the technology is incredibly impressive and the work is impressive, but I mean, we are entering into an era where you can use computers to create people, real people, and just have them, puppet them around, to do whatever you want for your story. And the technology's only gonna get better. Isn't that a little bit like, what are we doing? My interest is in storytelling. And this, whatever we're doing with all this fan service, it's something else. It looks like a story, it sounds like a story, and it walks like a story, but you can see the strings. Like, I can see what they want. I can see what kind of reaction they want out of me. I can see the work for what it really is rather than what it is supposed to be. In an ideal, situation when a story is working well, you can get immersed in it. You accept it for what it is. It feels like it's real. Even though you know that it's not, ultimately, you can get immersed in it and treat it as if it's really happening and that there are really people involved. But when the writing begins to falter, you start to see through the facade. You start to realize that this was something that somebody sat down at a computer and wrote. This was shot on a set. This isn't real. And I feel like when the fan service gets this bad, the illusion really begins to, like, it really crumbles. We need to retain subscribers on Disney Plus. How best can we do that? We could try to tell a story in earnest, but that's really hard. Alternatively, we can just pull characters from the franchise and plop them in to the story without any regard for how they slot in, let alone whether they're acting in character. And then, we just have the internet take care of the marketing for us by just rampantly speculating on who might show up next week. Better say subscribe to the platform. It's hard for me not to feel like that is a big objective here. It really does feel like it's informing the model. You can see it in the Marvel shows too. They all release weekly, and a lot of the time, a big stinger is, ooh, they're gonna get the iconic costume, or, ooh, who's that who might show up next? Who just showed up at the end? Better stay tuned to see what they're gonna do next episode. I wonder if it is that cynical. This is a really good way to get people speculating and make sure that they keep their subscription so that they can watch it again straight away next week and be part of the discourse immediately, right away. Get talking about it right away. You don't want to miss out on the discourse. You want to get those likes on Twitter, don't you? I really hope it isn't that cynical. But I don't know. I really don't know. It is a very concerning trend that the very expeditious way of telling a story now and getting the reaction you want is to pull characters from other stories that people like and throw them in there. Throw them in there, everybody loves it, nobody cares, whether or not it makes sense in the story or whether we're doing anything meaningful with these references. It is just pure fan service. It's key jangling. Look at the keys, look at them go, ain't they crazy and cool? More often than not, lately, it feels like we're getting it wrong rather than right. I get very worried that the wrong lessons are going to be learned from No Way Home. No Way Home could have been utterly catastrophic. It really could have been. But No Way Home utilizes Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. They bring them in, give those characters more payoffs that make sense for who they are and what they've been through, and slot into the story. Those two characters' stories feed into the main one, Tom Holland's Peter Parker, and prop up that story. We bring in the villains, we do new things with them, or continue their journeys. We have these interactions that are informed by their perspectives and their values. No Way Home is absolutely fan service. It's absolutely fan service when you see the three Spider-Men doing their little web slinging together. And, I'd be lying if I didn't say that put a smile on my face. It's fun to see. It's really cool. It definitely appeals to my monkey brain. But there's more going on than that. It's not just, hey, remember these guys? It's, hey, remember these guys? But also, their stories aren't done. We've still got more we can do with them. We can still give them payoffs. We can still give our villains payoffs. We can tell new stories with them. And we can use all of these stories to prop up the story of the main character and, round out that story. Round out that trilogy of him becoming Spider-Man. I don't know that the right lessons are going to be learned from that film, though. I think that they're going to look at how much money that film's making. That film is making tons of money. I think now it's made like $1.7 billion. It's made an absurdly large amount of money. I think it is currently the highest grossing standalone, like non-Avengers superhero film ever. I'm pretty sure it's outgrossed the first two Avengers films. It made a lot of money. And I'm worried that studios are going to look at the figures and look at the fact that there were Spider-Man from different films in there and go, oh, that's how we do it. We just get the other characters and throw them in there. And unfortunately, in terms of the general reaction, they might not be wrong in thinking that it'll work and that people are going to really like it. That's our fault. That is our fault. That is not their fault for creating something that we're going to buy. That is our fault. It's too easy. It's just too easy. I'm just concerned about the direction that we're heading, where big IPs, which, formerly, we had the big bombastic action movies, but the big bombastic action movies, they weren't like this in terms of just references and who's coming next, who are we going to see in the sequel. We used to get, like Total Recall, that was like a big movie. Terminator 2 is a big movie. Die Hard is a big movie. Lots of these just big action. Predator. Now, of course, a lot of these did get sequels, but they were just movies. They did movies that had a story that they wanted to tell, and they told it. Those used to be like the summer blockbusters. It wasn't just superhero films. And they had a story that they wanted to tell. At least there was sort of an attempt in earnest to do something other than just references. Feels like we're entering into a real scary era for, like, pop culture, where it is entirely about cameos, references, fan service, and not storytelling. It's really concerning. So this was in the news this week. Grand Theft Auto 6 is happening. And other comparably surprising news, roughly 1.25 billion of your cells have died since you started watching this podcast. Yeah, it's not a surprise at all, is it? Like, Grand Theft... I'm sure that was, but, Grand Theft Auto 6, that is a surprise. I guess it's nice to have that confirmation, because this might surprise some of you. Grand Theft Auto 5 came out in 2013. The game is over 8 years old. At the end of this year, it's going to be 9 years old. This is the longest gap that there's ever been between a new Grand Theft Auto game. But I mean, we all knew that 6 was happening, inevitably. Grand Theft Auto 5 sold over 150 million copies. GTA Online consistently rakes in hundreds of millions of dollars a year. It's honestly difficult to fully encapsulate just how successful of a product Grand Theft Auto 5 was. Like, that game has made an absurdly large amount of money. But I haven't played that game in years. I'm pretty sure the last time that I played Grand Theft Auto 5 was when it released on PC, and that was in 2015, if I remember correctly. Either 2015 or 2016. It's been a long time. And, comparably, last time I played Red Dead Redemption 2 was when it came out. I really like Rockstar's games, but I am just not that immersed in the online ecosystem for those games. I am really invested in the single-player games. I like the stories, I like the open worlds and going on adventures and doing the missions. That's what I really like Rockstar games. I like the games Rockstar makes. But they don't really make a whole lot anymore. To put it into perspective, in the last 10 years, Rockstar has released 3 games. Payne 3, Grand Theft Auto 5, and Red Dead Redemption 2. In the prior 10 years, Rockstar released GTA 3, Vice City, San Andreas 4, Liberty City Stories, Vice City Stories, Bully, Red Dead Redemption, LA Noire, Midnight Club, and many more. Their output in the 2000s was pretty huge, and comparatively, it's plummeted. And I think we all know why that is. Now, of course, games take longer to make now. A game like Red Dead Redemption 2 is going to take way longer to make than the first one did. And, even that one would have taken longer to make than Vice City. The turnaround between 3 and Vice City was a year. San Andreas was 2 years. And you were getting the spin-offs as well because you had multiple studios working on multiple games. Like Rockstar has multiple studios. The main one for a long time was Rockstar North. They were the guys who made, the main Grand Theft Auto. But then you had, the one in San Diego, Leeds. You had them all over the place, making their own little things. So while you have the mainline Grand Theft Auto games coming out, you've also got, the portable Grand Theft Auto games coming out at the same time. And then, Bully and all these other IPs. Because, games, you can make them a lot quicker back then. You didn't have as many assets you needed to put in. The bigger and more detailed and more complicated the games make, it just gets much, much harder. Takes longer, you need more people. I was about to say something really obvious. When it takes longer, it costs more, and it also costs more when you get more people. But bears repeating, right? It's just more expensive to make games, takes longer, you need more people. So it makes sense that the output is going to decrease, because you look at basically every studio that makes video games, the output of the studios that have lasted for 20 years, the output has steadily decreased in terms of not the amount of content, I guess, overall, but just that the games get more space between releases. Went from 1 year to 2 years to 3 years to, at this point, it seems like it's pretty common for a 4 or 5 year gap when it's just one studio making a game. And you can see why, in the games that they make, why it takes so long for them to release. The gaps in the reduced output, to some extent, can just be explained by the fact that you look at something like Red Dead Redemption 2, that game is huge. Putting to one side even the enormous amount of content, the attention to detail in that game is staggering. That game is hyper detailed, from the animations to the weather effects and the skyboxes, the snow, the horses, all of the animations for the, I guess I already talked about animation, but the details on the guns, the little touches as well of the way that I think there've been examples shown of when you shoot a sandbag and the way that the sand falls out and how much detail is put into that. It's an incredibly detailed game that has an enormous amount of content, an enormous amount of main content. I mean, I'm pretty sure the main story for that game, I think when I was playing it, it took me a week or 2 weeks to finish, playing a lot every day, pretty much. A decent amount every day. That's a big game. Takes a long time to make all that content. Takes a long time to shoot all that footage and write all that dialogue. Open world games in general take a long time to make. Rockstar are the king of open world games. It makes sense that it takes a long time to produce this content. But there is probably another explanation for why the games are coming out not as quick as they used to. Rockstar are very much in the live service club. So much so that basically every other franchise they have fallen to the wayside at the altar of Grand Theft Auto Online. Apparently even Red Dead Online is being neglected in favor of GTA Online. GTA Online is just a huge part of what they do now. It's a huge aspect of their work. And unfortunately, I'm just not a big fan of GTA Online. I played it for a little while several years ago. I haven't returned to it since. Just isn't for me. I like the single-player games that Rockstar makes. And unfortunately, I'm reaching a point where it's I'm not sure that there's any reason for me to ever expect Payne 4, or a sequel to LA Noire, or a sequel to Bully, or even a new IP I don't know that that's ever gonna happen. I think we just gotta expect Grand Theft Auto, maybe Red Dead Redemption, and of Grand Theft Auto, mainly GTA Online. I want to talk a little bit about Rockstar's output in general in their games, and speculate a little bit on Grand Theft Auto 6. Yeah, like I said, I really like Rockstar's games. Their older output is pretty formative for me. Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, San Andreas, ooh, mwah, love those games. Beautiful games, love them. Played them a lot back in the day. They're really formative in terms of, I think, my tastes in not only video games, but kind of my taste in writing and tone. Those games have a really fun, irreverent tone. Biting satire, sarcastic, dark, really fun sandboxes, lots of fun missions, really interesting, quirky characters, great worlds, really great worlds. Like, it's incredibly immersive, the worlds that they make, in terms of this alternate, hyper exaggerated, version of American cities. It's always been a really cool tone. And, that tone seeps through into a lot of the other games they make as well. Bully's really cool. Really liked Red Dead Redemption 1. I definitely like the commentary and satire in that game, and all of the observations on, like, the sort of culture of the West, the death of the West, the turn of the new century, and everything that they explored on that front. L.A. Noire, I know that wasn't made by Rockstar, but it was published by Rockstar in any case, so, we'll include it in that bunch. Really like L.A. Noire. I really, really like L.A. Noire. And it's not just that I really like where you could go with it. I think that game is great. I played it, I'm pretty sure I've beaten it like 3 or 4 times. The core mechanics in terms of the investigations and doing detective work and the interrogations, people meme the reactions and stuff. That's a cool idea, though. And I mean, in terms of the, that game had a lot of branches in terms of individual cases of where you could end up if you missed certain clues or you failed your interrogations. Like, there was a lot of content in that game, especially when you consider how hard it would have been to make all of that content with all of the animations that you needed to do for the faces. Super detailed open world. Huge, too. That game is a surprisingly big open world, which is kind of funny considering that there's not a lot to do in it outside of, the main case. You got some side missions, but you can explore it a bit, but there's not that much to do. But I mean, man, a sequel where you take all of the great ideas that the first game had and you build on them and expand it could be fucking awesome. But it's probably never gonna happen. And Max Payne 3, that game is great. I really, really like Max Payne 3. That's another game that I've beaten like 3 or 4 times. Might have even been more than that. Super strong, the mechanics are really simple, but really strong. Fantastic animations and detail. That game was well ahead of its time in terms of its graphical fidelity. Cool story. A cool presentation style. I know that it's kind of controversial. And that game is hyper-linear. That game is super duper linear. But it's a really great linear experience. And, I really like Grand Theft Auto 5. And I really like Red Dead Redemption 2. But I guess it's just that it feels like there has been a bit of a shift. And, a shift is inevitable when you're making games for like 20 years and you're doing a big franchise. Especially when, for a long time, the key leadership at Rockstar has been pretty much the same up until recently. I think every game from Grand Theft Auto 3 to Red Dead Redemption 2, basically every game was written by Dan Houser. Not just Dan Houser, there were other writers involved as well, but like he has been the head writer on all of those games, and you can see a certain persistent tone in all of Rockstar's games. It's really interesting, because they aren't the same. Red Dead Redemption isn't just Grand Theft Auto in the West. It feels like a really reductive description of that game. It's super interesting to maintain that persistent tone, while mechanically you're constantly trying to push it forward. There is something to be said about how dated the mechanics of these Rockstar games are now compared to other games. Red Dead Redemption 2 in particular, the controls are just kind of, it's like, alright guys, tapping X repeatedly to run, can we stop that please? I'm cool with that in like 2004, but now, just let me press down R3 to run. Don't do automatic snap lock on either as a default. You should have free aim as a default. Automatically snap lock on just means snap, zoom up, bang, headshot, snap, zoom up, bang, headshot. Just look up, bang, headshot. Just makes it way too easy. But I mean, even putting that to one side, those games are really fun to play still. I guess it's just, though there is a sense of persistence in their output, things have clearly changed. Grand Theft Auto 4's online was really humble, in a certain sense. It was just, hey, jump into the open world and rockets on at the airport. Isn't that fun? Yes, it is. It's very fun. Just roam around and do crazy shit in the open world and get into fights with other players and rob places. Just have fun in this open world. Buying anything? Pfft, nah. What do you mean? You already bought the game. Just have fun. Get in there. Have fun. And it was a lot of fun. Grand Theft Auto Online is a little bit different though. Now, this is coming from someone who hasn't played a lot of Grand Theft Auto Online, and I haven't really played it much in terms of engaging with the expansions or anything like that. But, you know, you buy stuff in that game. There's an economy in that game. You need to keep up. From what I've heard, that if you don't keep up with the game, then you get left behind, and it becomes really difficult to catch up in terms of the economy and the items that are available. Feels like, in terms of the way that you're going to engage with it, it's not purely about fun, and in terms of the way that the developers are going to engage with it, it's not purely about fun either. You gotta make money, right? We gotta focus resources into making sure that people keep playing online, because the resources that we put into making people play online and keeping them there, it's not going to be as significant as the investment we would need to make in a brand new game, but still going to make us a lot of money. Now that's interesting to think about, because Grand Theft Auto 5 was, at the time of its release, the most expensive game ever made. I think the combined development and marketing budget was around $260 million, and they made that back, and much more, in 3 days. They made $800 million on the first day. They were at $1 billion in 3 days. And I think at this point now, that game has single-handedly generated for Rockstar like at least $6 or $7 billion in revenue. At least. The investment of money, you know, that's not really a problem at all. You're going to make your money back. There is no risk of failure with Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto is too big to fail, ever. It's like the most popular franchise, like in the video game industry by far, in terms of just how broadly people want to engage with it. It is incredibly popular. That is not a concern. But as we've talked about a lot on other streams and in videos, that's just not how you do business. It's not about, oh, we'll make money. It's about how much money are we making versus how much money are we spending. What is the opportunity cost here? And I think it's safe to say at this point that the opportunity cost of developing a new Grand Theft Auto game is higher than the opportunity cost of investing in online. Because if it wasn't, they wouldn't have invested in online. They would have made a new one. The focus is clearly on Grand Theft Auto Online. And when Grand Theft Auto 6 rolls around, the focus, again, will probably be more on Grand Theft Auto Online. And there will be lessons that have been learned over the last decade on how to do a live service game, by looking at what everybody else has done, what's worked for them, what's worked for everybody else, because live service, I've talked about it before, live service is just the new name for a model that's pretty much as old as the industry itself, but, you know, like, the new way of doing live service, I'm sure is going to influence Grand Theft Auto Online in GTA 6. And, as has also been discussed before, you know, Rockstar is a name. When we talk about Rockstar, in the same way that we used to talk about Bungie or Naughty Dog, the studio's name is persistent, but the team is not the same. Leadership leaves, a lot of the staff leaves. When the staff leaves, talent leaves. And of course, talent comes in, but it's different talent. It's not the same people. And I think it's safe to say, at this point, pretty categorically, that the Rockstar that made, like, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is fundamentally not the same Rockstar that is making Grand Theft Auto 6 right now. It just isn't. Way more people are involved. New people are involved. Key leadership has now left. Dan Houser has left the company, which means I'm super curious how that game's going to turn out in terms of its writing and tone. I'll be very interested in seeing that. But it's not the same company. Their objectives have changed. I think Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be really interesting in terms of speculating on how those have changed, because I get the distinct impression that Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be quite different from basically all the other Rockstar games that have come out, including Red Dead Redemption 2. I guess on that subject though, what is Grand Theft Auto 6 going to be? What is it going to be? I feel like Grand Theft Auto, much like Super Smash Bros., has got the problem that there is an expectation of more. Bigger maps, new features. I wonder if they're going to do multiple player characters again or focus back in on one, and whether people perceive that as a downgrade. I definitely think the open world is going to be bigger, though. I would say that it's definitely going to be bigger. But where? Where are we going to go? Feels like Vice City is the one that everybody defaults to, that we're going to go back to Vice City, but it's been, it's been nearly 20 years since Grand Theft Auto has gone to a new location. To be fair, it's been nearly 20 years since we've last seen Vice City. So where to? Where are we going to go? Vice City does feel like a pretty obvious choice. And it could be that you do Vice City, but you also do other cities in Florida as well. It could be that the map is set across, like, the Gulf of Mexico, but I'm not sure about that, because Red Dead Redemption 2 is kind of set in that area as well. Partially. Feels like it doesn't come up a lot, but Chicago feels like a real option. Or the Midwest in general, the Great Lakes region. Chicago, Detroit, maybe Toronto. I don't know about that, though. The series has always been pretty focused in on America. Maybe the Pacific Northwest. I don't know about that, though, considering that Grand Theft Auto 5 kinda has elements of that, in terms of, like, Northern California, a little bit. You know, we haven't talked about it, but maybe they do San Fierro and Las Venturas. Another interesting thing to think about, given that Rockstar is based there, in the United Kingdom, London. They did London once. That was way earlier on, though. I think that was a Game Boy games, or I can't remember. I guess we always think it would be set in America. But maybe that would be the interesting new change if it's not. I remember reading a while ago that this was a rumor a while ago that the game would be set in Vice City, but also somewhere in South America. Like that there would either be two maps or there would be one big map separated by, a body of water, and that you could travel between Vice City and, like, Brazil or Colombia or something. That sounds really cool. In fact, if you had Caribbean islands as well. But maybe that's a little too ambitious, because that's a lot of content. But it would be an interesting change in that water would become much more important to how you engage with that map. We've had boats since Vice City, and I remember boats was a big deal. I remember, when Vice City was coming out, you got boats and helicopters, and then of course Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, it was planes. That could be really cool though, if you had a big body of water in between the main portions of the map, that there would be much more of an emphasis on boats, on planes. You could really push the underwater element too that they kind of tried in Grand Theft Auto 5. Maybe if you're looking for, like, hidden treasures. That sounds a bit like Black Flag, actually, Assassin's Creed 4. But hey, that game's 10 years old. I think people forget about that. You give it a try. That could be cool, though. I guess that's what I'd like to focus in a little bit more on. What would be the new mechanics that you would have in a new Grand Theft Auto? What would you be trying to do that would be different mechanically? Because, we're being real. That series needs to catch up and modernize mechanically anyway. But I guess that's more thinking about controls. It's hard to think about what you would do in terms of, like, a brand new thing. We've got all of, like, the primary vehicles at this point, because we even had submarines or of some sort in 5. I'm not sure. But I guess this is what I'm getting at, though. It's been a long time since Grand Theft Auto 5 came out. Red Dead Redemption 2 is obviously kind of follows in those lines, a big open world game from Rockstar, but I think that there will still be expectations based on how long it's been between these games. And particularly, how long is probably going to be between 6 and the next one. I would imagine that the gap is going to be even longer. I think there will be an expectation of substantial content and substantial improvements and changes too. And maybe it is, you know, the same situation that I think Smash Brothers is in now with Ultimate. It's like, how much more can you do at this point? You have a lot of money, but it's not that simple. It's not as simple as having a lot of money or a lot of people. That's not how game development works. What more can you do? And it's one of the reasons Dan Houser left in terms of writing. What more can we do in terms of a story? We haven't even talked about that. What kind of story are you going to tell? I guess it's hard to speculate whether it would be set in a certain time period or it's in the modern day. And if you're going to do it, what kind of story you want, tone, characters. I'm not sure. And if I'm not sure and I don't have to do the work, it's probably really hard over there. And, you know, even given everything I've said about GTA Online and stuff, maybe it's hard to think about what you would do for the next Grand Theft Auto because you kind of aren't expected to just do Grand Theft Auto 5 again. In much the same way that Grand Theft Auto 5, people didn't expect just Grand Theft Auto 4 again. They want something new. And in the same way that with Grand Theft Auto 4, people expected more than San Andreas because it's a new console. And especially with Grand Theft Auto 6. There's 2 generations between the last one and this new one. A decade. There's some lofty expectations that they need to meet. That's got to be quite daunting. Even having said all of that, though, and including the parts where I was a little bit more pessimistic in a certain sense, based on the direction that they've headed with online, I'm still really excited for whatever Rockstar makes next. Rockstar, even though I know it's not the same team, and even though they're not putting out as many games, and even though at this point I've pretty much abandoned any expectation that I'm going to get sequels to like LA Noire or Bully or anything like that, I still find myself pretty interested in whatever they are working on next. They are a very interesting beast in the industry, in that whatever it is they're working on, everybody's paying attention, everybody gets excited. They don't have to rock up to E3 or like the Game Awards or any events. They can do whatever they want. They can drop it and the whole internet's going to be talking about it. They can release it whatever time they want. Anytime that they release even a little bit of information, screenshots or a trailer, everybody's paying attention. Rockstar, they have a pedigree that I think is well earned, given the quality of their output over the years. And whatever the future holds, I'm going to be keenly interested in Grand Theft Auto 6. And given how much money the last one made, I think it would be an under-exaggeration. It would be understating it to say that I'm not the only one. That does it for this week. Thank you for hanging out and listening to what I have to say. Hopefully we can hit at least 3 weeks in terms of making sure that we're doing this weekly, because at that point, then it is a streak instead of just a coincidence. Thank you for watching. This is Cosmoronic number 3. I'm Fringy, and I will see you next time.